Emma Carter never believed in fate, until she met Jake Reynolds. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in New York City, and the golden leaves swirled in the breeze as she rushed through Central Park. Her heart pounded, not just from running late for a job interview, but from the anxiety that had been gnawing at her all week. This was her dream opportunity, a shot at writing for one of the biggest publishing houses in the country. She clutched her folder tightly against her chest, navigating through the throngs of people. Then, disaster struck. A sharp gust of wind tore the papers from her hands, scattering them like confetti. She let out a frustrated gasp, chasing after them as they danced across the pavement. "Got it," a deep, steady voice called out. She turned to see a man, tall and lean, standing a few feet away. He held her resume in one hand, his other stuffed casually in the pocket of his leather jacket. His warm brown eyes met hers, and for a second, she forgot how to breathe. "Thanks," she said breathlessly, stepping forward to take the paper from his hand. "No problem." His smile was easy, confident. "You look like you're in a hurry." "I am." She glanced at her watch. "I have exactly," she sighed, 4 minutes to make it across town. He grinned. "Then I won't keep you. But I'd hate to see a girl run through the city in those heels." She couldn't help but laugh. "It's a necessary evil. Maybe I'll see you again." Emma hesitated, then, surprising herself, said, "Maybe." And just like that, their story began. Days later, as she sipped a steaming latte at her favorite coffee shop, she heard that same voice behind her. "Fate must really want us to meet again." She turned to find him leaning against the counter, grinning at her. Me," he said, slipping into the chair across from her without invitation. "I never got your name." She studied him for a second. He had the look of someone who didn't take life too seriously, the slight scruff on his jaw, the way he tapped his fingers absent-mindedly on the table, the lopsided smirk. "Emma," she finally said. "Jake." He extended a hand. She took it, his touch lingering a moment longer than necessary. That afternoon turned into an evening, which turned into a long walk through the streets of New York. They talked about everything: books, music, their fears, their dreams. She learned that he was a musician, playing small gigs at bars and clubs, chasing a dream that seemed just out of reach. "This city is full of millions of people," Jake told her one night as they strolled along the Hudson, the lights of the skyline shimmering on the water. "But somehow, I found you." And just like that, she started to believe in fate. They spent weeks wrapped in a whirlwind of love, late-night conversations, stolen kisses in quiet bookstores, lazy Sunday mornings tangled in bedsheets. Emma had never felt this way before, like the city itself had conspired to bring them together. Then, just as everything seemed perfect, reality struck. Jake got an offer to go on tour with a band, a chance to finally break into the music industry. It was everything he had worked for, everything he had dreamed of. He broke the news over dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant in the East Village. She saw it in his eyes before he even said a word. "You're leaving," she whispered. "I don't want to," he said, reaching for her hand across the table. "But this is it, Emma. This is my shot." She squeezed his fingers, her heart aching. "Then you have to go. I don't want to lose you." Tears pricked her eyes, but she forced herself to smile. If it's meant to be, love will find its way back. And so, he left. The weeks turned into months. Jake sent her letters from every city he visited, describing the crowds, the adrenaline, the feeling of playing music for people who actually listened. She read each one with a bittersweet ache in her chest. But over time, the letters became less frequent. The calls grew shorter. Eventually, they stopped altogether. She tried to convince herself that it was inevitable, that life had simply taken them in different directions. But it still hurt. Instead of drowning in heartbreak, she channeled her pain into writing. She poured everything, their love, their laughter, their loss, into her novel. It became her escape, her way of keeping a piece of Jake with her. When her book was published, she didn't expect it to become a bestseller. She didn't expect the world to fall in love with the story of two people who met by chance and were torn apart by fate. She only wished that, somehow, Jake would read it. One snowy evening, Emma sat at a book signing in a small Manhattan bookstore. The line of readers stretched out the door, and she smiled politely as she signed copy after copy. Then, she looked up and felt the world stop. Jake stood at the front of the line, holding her book in his hands. Snowflakes clung to his dark hair, and his eyes held that same warmth, that same fire. "I read every page," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I never stopped loving you." Tears filled her eyes. You came back. I promised I would. He stepped closer. I had to follow my dreams, but the biggest one was always you. She let out a shaky laugh, blinking away the tears. You idiot. You took long enough. He smiled, and then, right there, in the middle of the bookstore, he kissed her. Outside, the snow kept falling, the city kept moving, and life continued on. But for Emma and Jake, time stood still. Because love had found its way back, just like she always believed it would.